A teacher was wrongfully accused of stealing school charity money. When her daughter fell seriously ill, she faced the fight of her life. No one could have imagined what would happen next. A story of resilience and hope that will touch your heart. Welcome back. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the story. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Ueti Williams hurried up the steps of Willowbrook Elementary. At 43, she moved with the energetic purpose that had characterized her 15 years of teaching fourth grade in this tight-knit suburban community just outside of Chicago. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her bright green eyes sparkled with anticipation. Today was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of her career. The announcement of her receiving the Willowbrook Excellence in Teaching Award, recognition of her innovative classroom methods and tireless dedication to her students. As she reached for the door handle, Principal Katricia Donovan stepped out, her typically warm smile replaced by an expression Ueti couldn't quite read. Behind her stood two members of the school board and a man in a dark suit whom Ueti didn't recognize. "Ueti, we need to speak with you before the assembly," Principal Donovan said, her voice unnaturally formal. "In my office, please." The fluorescent lights of the principal's office seemed harsher than usual as Ueti sat rigidly in a chair that suddenly felt too small. Her hands trembled slightly as Principal Donovan slid a folder across the desk toward her. Inside were bank statements, security camera footage stills, and a formal letter of suspension. "The evidence is quite clear," said Mr. Reynolds, the school board president, his voice devoid of the friendliness it had held just last week when they'd discussed plans for the spring science fair. "Security footage shows someone using your access card to enter the administrative office at 11:42 p.m. last Tuesday. The foundation account shows a transfer of $75,000 to an offshore account, and your personal account received a deposit of $5,000 the following morning." Ueti's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. "This is impossible. I was home Tuesday night with my family. I haven't received any unusual deposits. There must be some mistake." "The evidence is substantial, Mrs. Williams," said the stranger in the suit, who introduced himself as a detective from the Financial Crimes Division. "Until the investigation is complete, your teaching credentials are suspended, and we must ask you not to contact any students, parents, or staff members." The world seemed to slow down as Ueti walked through the hallways she had traversed thousands of times. Students peeked out from classrooms, their curious eyes following her as she was escorted from the building. Through the windows of her own classroom, she could see her students sitting in a circle, probably for the morning meeting she had instituted years ago. Standing at the front was a substitute teacher she didn't recognize. Outside, the autumn sunshine felt like a cruel mockery of the darkness enveloping her life. Ueti sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. The phone in her purse buzzed insistently. It was a text from her 17-year-old daughter, Neri. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come home early?" The universe, it seemed, wasn't finished with delivering blows that day. Ueti found Neri sitting on her bed, surrounded by crumpled tissues. Her daughter's typically vibrant face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. In her hands, she clutched a medical report that would change everything. "I didn't want to worry you and Dad," Neri whispered, her voice breaking. "I've been feeling tired for months, but I thought it was just stress from college applications. The dizzy spells started a few weeks ago, and then..." The words "rare autoimmune disorder" jumped out from the page, followed by "specialized treatment, protocol and estimated costs." The recommended specialist was in Boston, the treatment experimental and not fully covered by insurance. Ueti's mind reeled with the double blow. Her career, her reputation, her very identity as the trusted teacher of Willowbrook now lay in ruins. And her beloved daughter, her only child, was facing a health crisis that required financial resources they simply didn't have, especially now with her income suspended and their savings likely to be frozen during the investigation. The sound of a car door slamming announced the arrival of her husband, Ftward, a commercial pilot for a major airline. He had cut short an international trip when she texted him the news about her suspension. "What exactly happened?" he demanded, his voice strained with confusion and barely concealed doubt. "How could security footage show you there if you were home?" "I don't know, Ed," she replied, the nickname feeling strange given the formality that had suddenly sprung up between them. "Someone must have taken my access card, or the footage has been tampered with. You know I would never steal, especially not from the Children's Foundation." Ftward's silence spoke volumes. After 20 years of marriage, his lack of immediate defense cut deeper than any accusation. "They're saying there's a paper trail, Youette. Deposits into our account. Money I never saw or spent. Someone is framing me, and I need you to believe that." Her husband's eyes darted away, unable to meet her desperate gaze. "I want to, but this looks bad. Really bad. And what's this?" He picked up Neri's medical report from the kitchen counter where Yeti had placed it. His face paled as he read. "Why am I just hearing about this now? She only told me today. She's been hiding it from both of us." The weight of their new reality settled over the house like a suffocating blanket. Yeti stood in her kitchen, the heart of a home that had always been filled with laughter, student artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator, and the comforting aromas of family meals. Now it felt like a stranger's house, cold and unwelcoming. As night fell, Yeti sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop. Her email inbox overflowed with messages, parents demanding explanations, colleagues expressing shock and disappointment, and an official notice from the teachers' union outlining the limits of their ability to help given the nature of the allegations. A notification popped up for the community Facebook group, where she had once been a beloved, regular contributor, sharing classroom updates and community event information. Now the page buzzed with speculation and thinly veiled accusations. 15. Years of building trust and relationships seemed to have evaporated overnight. Through her kitchen window, Yeti could see lights still on in neighboring houses. She wondered how many conversations centered around her alleged crimes tonight. How many parents were deciding to request their children be placed with different teachers should she somehow return to the classroom. A soft knock at the back door startled her from her thoughts. Standing on her porch was Driss Harper, her 80-year-old neighbor, who had lived in the same house for over 50 years. In her hands was a casserole dish. "Figured you might not feel like cooking tonight," Driss said matter-of-factly, pushing past Yeti into the kitchen. "And I've got something stronger than tea if you need it." She pulled a flask from her cardigan pocket and placed it on the counter with a decisive thunk. Yeti managed a weak smile. "I don't think alcohol is going to fix this, Driss." "Nothing fixes the big things, dear, but sometimes a little bourbon makes them easier to look at straight on." The elderly woman moved around the kitchen with surprising energy, pulling down plates and serving up the casserole. "Now tell me what really happened, not that nonsense they're saying at the Piggly Wiggly." For the first time that day, Yeti felt the slightest loosening of the knot in her chest. Someone was actually asking for her side of the story. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The following weeks brought a cascade of new challenges. Yeti's bank accounts were indeed frozen as part of the investigation. Ftward's flight schedule kept him away for days at a time, and the distance between them grew with each stilted phone conversation. Neri's condition required weekly treatments at Chicago Memorial Hospital. each one draining their emergency credit card further. Driss Harper proved to be an unexpected ally. The retired legal secretary had experienced her own public humiliation decades earlier when she'd been accused of leaking confidential information at her law firm. Though eventually exonerated, she had never forgotten the crushing weight of community judgment. "You've got the same look I had back then," Driss told Ueti over coffee one morning. "Like you're drowning while everyone stands on the shore debating whether you deserve a life preserver." Together, they began methodically reviewing everything Ueti could remember from the weeks leading up to the accusation. Who had access to her classroom where she sometimes left her bag unattended? Who might benefit from discrediting her? "You need to think about that new principal of yours," Driss suggested, her arthritis-gnarled fingers tapping thoughtfully on her mug. "Arrived just, 6 months ago, right after Superintendent Harrison retired." "Katricia Donovan," Ueti confirmed. "She came highly recommended from a prestigious private academy in Boston. The board was thrilled to get her." "And how did you two get along before all this?" Ueti considered the question. "Professionally cordial, but we did have some fundamental disagreements about educational approaches. She's been pushing hard for implementing a new technology-based curriculum that would essentially standardize all teaching. I led the teacher committee that recommended against it, arguing that we needed to maintain personalized approaches, especially for struggling students." Driss's eyes narrowed. "Follow the money, dear. Always follow the money." Meanwhile, Ueti's financial situation grew increasingly desperate. With her teaching income gone and legal fees mounting, she began offering private tutoring sessions from Driss's home to avoid violating the order to stay away from Willowbrook families. Word spread cautiously through certain sympathetic parents, and soon she had a small but steady stream of students, mostly from neighboring communities who weren't directly connected to Willowbrook Elementary. Among her new students was 9-year-old Oscar Chen, a brilliantly creative but struggling reader whose mother, Lena, worked at First Midwest Bank, the same bank where the suspicious transaction from Ueti's account had been processed. "Oscar talks about you all the time," Lena mentioned one day as she picked up her son after a session. "It's Ms. Williams this, Ms. Williams that. You have such a gift with children." Ueti smiled sadly. "I miss my classroom every day." Lena hesitated, glancing around to ensure Oscar was out of earshot. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there have been some unusual patterns at the bank recently. Several charitable accounts have had similar discrepancies, small amounts siphoned off that are only noticeable if you're specifically looking for them." Ueti's heart raced. Other charities, not just the school foundation, the Children's Hospital Auxiliary, the Community Theatre Renovation Fund, the Historical Society. Lena lowered her voice further. "Most organizations don't scrutinize their accounts closely enough to notice. The school foundation might not have either if the amount hadn't been so large." This was the first piece of concrete information suggesting a larger pattern, one that might exonerate Ueti. "Is there any way to trace where those funds went?" "That's above my pay grade," Lena replied, "but I'll keep my eyes open." As spring arrived in Willowbrook, the natural beauty of the season contrasted sharply with the ugliness Ueti encountered whenever she ventured into public. At the grocery store, former friends would suddenly become fascinated with produce labels to avoid greeting her. At Nary's school events, parents would leave conspicuous empty seats around her. Nary's health continued to deteriorate, despite the treatments. The specialists were now recommending a more aggressive approach available at Boston Medical Center, one of the few facilities specializing in her rare condition. The estimated costs made Ueti physically ill with worry. During a particularly difficult night at Chicago Memorial Hospital, with Nary finally asleep after hours of pain, Ueti found unexpected compassion from a night shift nurse named Deronica James. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Deronica observed, bringing Wetty a blanket and hospital-grade coffee. "I've been there, watching my own daughter suffer while fighting battles on all fronts." Something in the nurse's tone made Ueti look up sharply. "You know who I am, don't you?" Deronica nodded. "My cousin's kids go to Willowbrook, but I also used to work at Westridge Academy in Boston before moving to Chicago." "Westridge Academy? That's where Principal Donovan came from." "Exactly. And she left under circumstances that weren't as pristine as her recommendation letters suggested. There was another teacher there, brilliant educator, who was suddenly accused of financial mismanagement after opposing Katricia's pet projects. Sound familiar? But why would... Wait, do you know what happened to that teacher?" Veronica's face darkened. "She never found work in education again. Last I heard, she was working retail in New Hampshire." The conversation was interrupted by a call light from another room, but Veronica promised to share more during her next shift. For the first time in months, Ueti felt the faintest stirring of hope. Not just suspicion, but a tangible connection that might help prove her innocence. Stay tuned for the shocking moment when Ueti finally discovers who has been working against her, and the incredible risk she must take to save not only her reputation, but her daughter's life. The annual summer festival in Willowbrook had always been one of Ueti's favorite community events. For 15 years, she had run the Children's Craft Pavilion, helping little hands create pine cone bird feeders and painted rock paperweights. This year, she stood on the periphery, watching as a younger teacher enthusiastically led her former station. "It's not right," said a voice beside her. She turned to find Kevin Blackburn, the father of twins she had taught 3 years earlier. "My boys still talk about how you helped Ethan overcome his reading anxiety. You were the only teacher who ever figured out that he needed glasses, not remedial help." Wetty's throat tightened with emotion. "How are they doing?" "Great, thanks. To the foundation you built with them. Listen, I'm on the board of the Historical Society, and after what happened with the school foundation, I decided to audit our accounts personally." Kevin lowered his voice. "We found discrepancies too, small amounts but consistent, going back 6 months. That's when Katricia Donovan arrived in Willowbrook," Wetty whispered. Kevin nodded. "And here's something else. The technology curriculum package she's been advocating for. The company that produces it is EdTech Innovations. Their CEO is on the board of Westridge Academy, where she worked before coming here," Ueti finished, pieces falling into place. "Exactly. The contract for implementing that system would be worth millions to the company, especially if Willowbrook becomes a model school that other districts emulate." As they spoke, Wetty noticed Katricia Donovan across the festival grounds, deep in conversation with a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. She discreetly took a photo with her phone and later, with Kevin's help, identified him as Richard Blackstone, the CEO of EdTech Innovations. The pieces were starting to connect, but Ueti still lacked definitive proof, and even with these suspicious connections, she couldn't explain how her access card had been used or how money had appeared in her account. By midsummer, Neri's condition had worsened to the point where hospitalization became necessary. The doctors were now openly discussing the need for the specialized treatment in Boston, not as an option, but as a necessity. Ueti spent long nights in an uncomfortable hospital chair, researching financial assistance programs and drafting appeals to the insurance company. Duard's response to the crisis had been to take on additional flights, often international, routes that kept him away for a week or more at a time. His physical absence mirrored the emotional distance that had grown between them. While he never openly accused Ueti of the embezzlement, His failure to unequivocally stand by her spoke volumes. "I just don't understand what's happening to us," Wetty said during a rare moment when they were both at Neri's bedside. "We used to face everything as a team." Evduard rubbed his tired eyes. "I'm trying, Yuet. I really am. But every time I've wrapped my head around one crisis, another one hits. The hospital bills, the legal fees, the way people look at us in town, it's too much." "It's worse for Neri," Wetty whispered, looking at their sleeping daughter. "She's not just fighting her illness, she's fighting the shame of what people are saying about her mother." A look of genuine pain crossed Edward's face. "I know, and I hate it." He reached across the bed and took Wetty's hand for the first time in weeks. "I've requested a position change, fewer international flights, more domestic routes. I need to be here more." It wasn't a declaration of unwavering faith in her innocence, but it was something, a small step back toward the partnership they had once shared. As summer turned to fall, Willowbrook's distinctive autumn traditions began. The Apple Harvest Festival, normally Yuetti's favorite local custom, became yet another gauntlet of awkward encounters and whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Yet even here, she found unexpected moments of support. Mrs. Gonzalez, whose son had severe dyslexia until Yuetti's innovative teaching methods helped him become a confident reader, deliberately seated herself next to Yuetti at the community picnic. Gables, the choir director from the community theatre, whose renovation fund had also experienced accounting irregularities, sought her out to compare notes. The high school librarian slipped her a USB drive containing public records of EdTech Innovations business practices in other school districts, including 3 cases of teachers being discredited after opposing implementation. The change was subtle but significant. A small but growing network of community members was beginning to question the narrative about Willowbrook's once beloved teacher. Meanwhile, Nurse Veronica had made good on her promise to share information about Catricia Donovan's time at Westridge Academy. She introduced Yuetti to a former administrative assistant who had worked there during Catricia's tenure and had witnessed the systematic dismantling of another teacher's reputation. "The pattern is identical," the woman explained via video chat. "First, isolate a respected teacher who opposes the technology implementation. Then, create evidence of financial impropriety. Finally, use the scandal to push through the changes, while everyone's distracted." "But how did they get my access card? How did they make deposits into my account?" Yuetti pressed. "I don't know the specifics of your case, but at Westridge there was a security expert involved. Someone who could manipulate digital records and security systems." The conversation left Yuetti with more questions than answers, but it strengthened her growing conviction that she was dealing with a sophisticated scheme rather than a simple frame-up. As October brought brilliant foliage to Willowbrook, an unexpected development shifted the course of Yuetti's investigation. A historic early snowstorm hit the Chicago suburbs, dumping 2 feet of snow and effectively isolating Willowbrook for several days. With power lines down in many areas and roads impassable, the community fell back on old-fashioned neighborly support. Yuetti, who had always maintained detailed contact information for families throughout her neighborhood, naturally fell into a coordination role, connecting those with generators to those without heat, organizing volunteer snow shovelers for elderly residents, and helping establish a temporary warming center at the community fire station. For those few days, the accusations against her seemed to fall away as more pressing needs took precedence. People who had avoided her for months now gratefully accepted her assistance in finding warm beds for their children or medication for their grandparents. When the roads finally cleared, something had subtly shifted in the community's perception. Wetty Williams, the alleged embezzler, had once again become Wetty Williams, the natural leader who knew exactly how to bring people together in a crisis. It was during the cleanup that Wetty made another crucial discovery. While helping the Johnsons clear fallen branches from their yard, she noticed their new security camera setup. "After all the break-ins last spring, we decided to upgrade," Mr. Johnson explained. "It's a smart system, connects to our phones, stores footage in the cloud, the works." "Break-ins?" Wetty asked, suddenly alert. "I didn't hear about any break-ins." "Oh, nothing major stolen. Mostly just signs of someone having been in people's houses. The police thought it might be teenagers looking for prescription drugs. We started noticing things slightly moved, but nothing valuable taken." A chill that had nothing to do with the snow ran through Wetty. "When exactly did this happen?" "March through May, mainly. Died down over the summer." March through May, the months immediately preceding and following her accusation. "Have you ever been wrongfully accused of something serious? Or do you know someone who has faced false allegations that threatened their reputation and livelihood?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. After the snowstorm, Wetty began looking at her own home with new eyes. If other houses in Willowbrook had been invaded, could hers have been as well? The thought of someone entering her personal space, potentially planting evidence or stealing her access card, was deeply disturbing. With Driss's encouragement, she hired a security specialist to sweep her home. The results were shocking. 3 small, sophisticated surveillance devices were discovered, one in the kitchen, one in her home office, and one in the main bedroom. According to the specialist, they had been professionally installed and were of a type typically used by high-end security firms or corporate espionage operations, not ordinary criminals. "Someone's been watching you," the specialist explained. "For months, based on the installation work. They could see every password you typed, hear every conversation, track your movements throughout the house." The violation felt physical, as if someone had repeatedly assaulted her in her sleep, but it also provided the first concrete evidence that she had been specifically targeted by a sophisticated operation. With this discovery, something shifted inside Wetty. The desperate scramble to defend herself transformed into a righteous anger that demanded action. She had spent months trying to quietly prove her innocence, worried about creating more scandal that might further harm Neri or the school community. Now she realized that playing defense had gotten her nowhere. It was time to go on the offensive. The annual school board review meeting was scheduled for early November. Typically a procedural affair where budgets were finalized and performance metrics reviewed, this year's meeting had generated unusual interest due to the pending vote on implementing the controversial EdTech curriculum that Principal Donovan had been championing. Wetty arrived early, accompanied by Driss, Kevin Blackburn, and several other community members who had joined her informal investigation. She had notified the board of her intention to speak during the public comment period, but had deliberately kept vague about her specific topic. As she entered the elementary school gymnasium where larger district meetings were held, the familiar scent of floor wax and decades-old wood brought a wave of nostalgia and grief for the career she feared might be permanently lost. The seats were filling quickly, with an unusual number of parents and teachers in attendance. Principal Donovan sat at the board table, her expression freezing momentarily when she spotted Wetty. Beside her was Richard Blackston from EdTech Innovations, reviewing presentation materials. When Wetty's name was called for public comment, the room fell silent. She approached the microphone with steady steps, carrying a folder of documents and a small electronic device. "For 15 years I served this community as a teacher," she began, her voice stronger than she had anticipated. "I know many of you believed I betrayed that trust. Today, I'm here to present evidence that I was framed as part of a sophisticated scheme to discredit me and push through educational changes that I had effectively opposed with data-driven arguments." She placed the surveillance devices on the table before the board. These were found hidden in my home by a professional security sweep. For months, someone has been monitoring my every move, stealing my passwords, and listening to my private conversations. This level of invasion goes far beyond ordinary criminal activity. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Ueti methodically laid out the connections she had uncovered. The similar incidents at Westridge Academy, the pattern of financial discrepancies in multiple community organizations, the business relationship between Principal Donovan and EdTech Innovations. But most damning of all, Ueti continued, is this evidence. She played a recording provided by Lena Chen from the bank, showing unusual patterns in multiple organizational accounts, all traced back to a shell company that, when investigated, connected directly to a subsidiary of EdTech Innovations. Richard. Blackstone's face had grown increasingly pale during Ueti's presentation. Before the board could even respond, he stood abruptly. This is preposterous. Mrs. Williams is clearly trying to deflect from her own crimes by constructing an elaborate conspiracy theory. Is it a conspiracy theory when multiple witnesses from Westridge Academy report the same pattern? Ueti challenged. Is it coincidence that every teacher who has effectively opposed your curriculum has faced similar accusations? The board president attempted to restore order as the room erupted in questions and exclamations. These are serious allegations that require investigation. Investigation by whom? Ueti interrupted. The same authorities that received falsified evidence against me. I'm calling for an independent review committee composed of educators and finance professionals with no connection to either Willowbrook School District or EdTech Innovations. What happened next would leave everyone stunned. Principal Donovan suddenly stood, gathered her materials, and attempted to leave the meeting. As she reached the door, 2 plainclothes officers stepped forward, blocking her exit. Patricia Donovan, we have questions regarding evidence of financial fraud across multiple institutions, one officer stated, showing his badge. We'd like you to accompany us voluntarily, or we can return with a warrant. The gymnasium erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. Would the truth finally shatter the web of lies that had entangled Ueti's life? Just as Ueti seemed on the verge of vindication, another crisis emerged. Eftward called in the middle of the meeting, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. It's Neri. She's been rushed to Chicago Memorial. Her doctors say we can't wait any longer for the Boston treatment. We need to make a decision tonight. In that moment, staring at the board members who were finally beginning to look at her with something other than suspicion, Ueti faced an impossible choice. Stay to fight for her reputation and career, or rush to her daughter's side during a critical medical crisis. It was no choice at all. I have to go, she told Driss, handing over her remaining documentation. Neri needs me. Go, the elderly woman urged. This will keep, your daughter won't. As Ueti rushed through the parking lot toward her car, she was surprised to find Ftward waiting for her. I thought we could go together, he said simply. The gesture, choosing to wait for her rather than going straight to the hospital, conveyed more than words could have. At Chicago Memorial, they found Neri conscious but frighteningly weak. The specialist was recommending immediate transfer to Boston via medical transport, a cost their insurance would only partially cover, leaving them with an impossible financial burden on top of their already mounting debts. We'll find a way, Ueti promised her daughter, holding her thin hand. We've come this far together. I know you will, Mom, Neri whispered. You always do. She glanced at something behind Ueti. And I think you have reinforcements. Ueti turned to find the hospital room door opening as Jerris arrived, followed by Kevin Blackburn, several former students and their parents, and even a few of her teaching colleagues who had maintained a cautious distance until now. We heard Neri needed to get to Boston, Kevin said. The Historical Society just voted to establish an emergency medical transport fund. Seems the first qualifying case just happened to come up tonight. Nurse Veronica stepped forward. And I've spoken with my colleagues at Boston Medical. They're expecting you, and they've enrolled Neri in a research trial that will cover most of the treatment costs. Overwhelmed, Ueti looked from face to face. I don't understand. The board meeting, what happened? Let's just say the evidence you presented was compelling enough that even the most skeptical board members are asking hard questions, Kevin explained. And those officers weren't bluffing. They've been building a case against Donovan and EdTech for months. Your evidence was the final piece they needed. As arrangements were made for Neri's transport, Fedward pulled Ueti aside. There's something else you should know. I've been offered the international pilot position I've been working toward for years. Ueti's heart sank. After everything, would their family be pulled apart just as they were starting to heal? I turned it down, Fedward continued. Instead, I accepted a training position at O'Hare. I'll be home every night. The gesture brought tears to Ueti's eyes. Ed, that position was your dream. No, he said firmly. You and Neri are my dream. The job was just a job. He took both her hands in his. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that. I'm sorry I ever doubted you, even for a moment. As they prepared for Neri's medical journey, Ueti was startled by a visit from Lena Chen, who arrived with a laptop and an excited expression. You need to see this, she insisted, setting up the computer at Neri's bedside. On screen was a social media page that had gone viral overnight. Justice for Ms. Williams, a student documentary. Ueti watched in astonishment as her daughter's face appeared on screen. Mum doesn't know I've been working on this for my media studies project, Neri explained in the video. But I've been documenting everything since the day she came home and told us about the accusations. The documentary skillfully wove together interviews with former students, parents, and community members, interspersed with footage Neri had captured of Ueti's tireless efforts to clear her name while simultaneously caring for her family. It culminated with security camera footage from a local coffee shop showing Principal Donovan meeting with a man later identified as a security expert with ties to EdTech Innovations, on the very day the school's foundation money disappeared. How did you get this? Ueti asked, turning to her daughter with amazement. Neri managed a weak smile. Dad helped. When you started suspecting Principal Donovan, he used his pilot connections to research her movements on days surrounding the accusations. The coffee shop footage was a long shot, but we got lucky. Fedward shrugged with uncharacteristic modesty. I may have been afraid to fully believe at first, but that doesn't mean I wasn't still fighting for you in my own way. Within hours, the documentary had been viewed by thousands, including every member of the Willowbrook School Board and the district superintendent. By the time Neri was settled in the medical transport plane, Dutch Justice Forms Williams was trending locally on social media. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of developments. While Ueti remained at Neri's side in Boston, the Willowbrook community continued the fight for her vindication. Driss Harper, despite her advanced age, became an unlikely social media sensation as she provided daily updates on the investigation's progress. The Independent Review Committee, established under intense community pressure, quickly uncovered the full extent of the scheme. Principal Donovan had indeed arranged for Ueti's access card to be duplicated during one of the covert home invasions. The security expert had then used it to enter the administrative office, while simultaneously hacking the security camera feed to make it appear as if Ueti herself was present. Most shocking of all, the stolen funds had never actually left the school district. They had been hidden in an encrypted account intended to be discovered and recovered once the EdTech curriculum was approved, allowing Donovan to claim credit for resolving the financial crisis while permanently discrediting Ueti, her most effective opponent. As winter settled over Boston, Neri's response to the specialized treatment brought cautious optimism from her medical team. The cutting-edge approach was working, slowly but steadily improving her condition. During long hospital days, Ueti and Eftwood rebuilt their partnership, planning for a future they now believed they would have together. By January, the legal proceedings against Patricia Donovan and her EdTech collaborators were underway, and Ueti had received a formal apology from the Willowbrook School Board, along with an offer of reinstatement and back pay. The district superintendent had personally traveled to Boston to deliver the news and to offer something unexpected, a position developing a balanced educational approach that would thoughtfully integrate beneficial technology while preserving the personalized teaching methods that had made Ueti such an effective educator. "We don't want to just go back to how things were," the superintendent explained. "We want to learn from this experience, to build something better that honors both innovation and human connection in the classroom." As spring returned to Willowbrook, so did the Williams family. Neri's condition had stabilized enough for regular outpatient treatment at Chicago Memorial under Nurse Veronica's watchful care. Eftwood's new training position kept him home most evenings, allowing the family dinners that had once been the heart of their home life to resume. Ueti's return to the elementary school was marked by a flood of welcome-back cards from students and a hallway lined with teachers and staff applauding as she walked to her classroom. Many had tears in their eyes, some from joy at her return, others from lingering guilt at how quickly they had accepted her guilt without question. In her reclaimed classroom, Ueti found a small silver frame on her desk. Inside was a quote from Maya Angelou: "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated." The gift card was signed simply, "From those who never stopped believing." The last pieces of healing came during the spring school board meeting, exactly 1 year after the false accusations had first been made. There, the board unanimously established the Ueti Williams Teaching Excellence Award, to be given annually to educators who demonstrated both innovation and personal dedication to their students. As Ueti accepted the honor, she looked out at the faces in the gymnasium. Former students now grown, parents who had stood by her, colleagues who had eventually found the courage to support her, and most importantly, her family. Eftwood sat proudly in the front row, his arm around Neri, whose color had returned along with her characteristic vibrant spirit. "For 15 years, I defined myself by what I gave to this community," Ueti said into the microphone. "Through this ordeal, I've learned that true strength lies not in standing alone, but in allowing others to stand with you. Every student I ever taught knows my favorite classroom saying, 'We rise together.' I never fully understood what that meant until now." Later that evening, as twilight settled over Willowbrook, Ueti sat on her front porch surrounded by those who had become her unexpected support system during the darkest year of her life. Driss, still spry despite her years, was regaling Neri's friends with tales of her own youthful adventures. Kevin Blackburn and his family had brought dessert. Nurse Veronica was deep in conversation with Fedward about his new training program for pilots. As laughter drifted through the evening air, Ueti felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey had been unimaginably difficult, but she had emerged with a deeper understanding of both herself and her community. She had discovered that she could be not just a giver, but also a recipient of care and support. She had learned that family could be rebuilt even stronger after nearly breaking apart. And she had found that a community, even after turning its back, could find its way to justice and reconciliation. The path ahead would not be without challenges. Neri's condition would require ongoing treatment. The emotional scars of the ordeal would take time to fully heal. But as Ueti looked around at the impromptu gathering on her porch, at the unlikely family that had formed in the crucible of crisis, She knew with certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. In the warm glow of porch lights and friendship, Retty Williams had finally come home, not just to her house or her job, but to herself and to the truth she had always taught her students, that integrity, perseverance, and compassion could overcome even the darkest of circumstances. It was a lesson she had lived, not just taught, and one that would guide her teaching for years to come. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments, so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.